Well, we're celebrating the centennial of Route 66, and sometimes in movie reels, in our past recollections, created often by film, we picture a more perfect past. But as we've seen, sometimes things aren't quite as pretty behind the scenes. We talk about the emergence of women along the Mother Road during the 100 years of Route 66 with the author with a fantastic perspective, Route 66 author Cheryl Eichar Jett. You'll have a better feel for the often quiet struggles of your mother, grandmother, or great-grandmother, what have you. It's a special edition of the Forum on WSMI. We're celebrating the centennial of Route 66, and one person who's helped us celebrate 66 over the years is Litchfield native and current Edwardsville resident Cheryl Eichar Jett, the author of many Route 66 books, and today she'll talk about her new one, Aprons Away, Women's Work on Route 66, Stories of the Unsung Heroes of the Mother Road. Well, let's talk about the book. What inspired it? When you think of Route 66, you think of, you think of classic cars, but you think of everyday America at the same time, the diners and the workplaces along the Mother Road. What inspired you to take this female-centric view of 66?
Well, as you say, when people think of Route 66, they think of cars with fins, and they think of men working on the highway to pave it, and stopping in the diners, that sort of thing. But many of the women's work roles were actually very visible. For instance, the motel court proprietors, women that operated souvenir shops or basket shops, women that operated their own restaurants or that worked as a waitress in someone else's restaurant. But, those are sort of like the legs of travel and tourism industry. And so those women were just very, very visible. So when I got into Route 66 and travel writing, which now has been almost 20 years ago, I started hearing about some of those women that were absolute icons. They were thought of as very legendary. There were stories about some of the women in the 1930s and 40s that, someone drove up on their doorstep and they had almost no gas left or no food, and these iconic women would hand them a sandwich or give them a couple bucks worth of gas to get to the next stop. So I thought, okay, all of these stories need to be sort of collected in some form that, that they're grouped and the range of their work can be appreciated. But then I started thinking, what about the women behind the scenes? Journalists, public servants, artists, muralists, designers, etc. And so that's when I sort of went on the search for these other women so that I could really collect them and show the whole range of women's work roles during the 100 years so far of Route 66.
It's a catchy name, but of course it's more than a catchy name. It is a deeper message. What was the process of coming up with Aprons Away?
Well, a close friend of mine who's also a historian, she's also a park ranger with National Park Service, good friend of mine for many years, she knew that I wanted to present this sort of duality of the women's roles in travel and tourism, but then the other women behind the scenes who very often were in what was traditionally male-dominated roles. And she came up with the name for me, Aprons Away, which of course represents the women that symbolically threw their aprons away to cast off household work, to go to institutions of higher learning and learn architecture or highway engineering or something, again, that was mostly male-dominated, while still honoring the women that used their traditional skills like cooking and baking, that sort of thing. In other words, they kept their aprons on and made good careers of that.
Well, it looked like you had a pretty good reception at the book launch party over there in Edwardsville.
Yes, we had standing room only for a while, and I appreciate Goshen Coffee Cafe hosting us. They were very enthusiastic hosts. I've become friends with some of the people in the various Goshen locations, and new friends that work in all three of the locations came, and many great friends from the Edwardsville area and old friends from St. Louis came over and sold out a case of books, which is some indicator, I guess, but just the fact that they came and were enthusiastic about the book. And some of them I've heard from since that are enjoying reading it. So, of course, there's a lot of satisfaction in that. So I'm grateful to all of them.
Well, the interesting thing, too, here, I look at the pictures of the crowd, and you talk about open hearts and minds, and I noticed a lot of people on hand weren't female.
Yes, this book is really resonating with women, although there were men there that enthusiastically purchased the book, and men that didn't have a woman along with them to prod them into it. And yeah, so I'm seeing some more general appeal as well as just the appeal to women.
Obviously, right time, right place. I know the Route 66 enthusiasm. It's been noticeable. I mean, the Route 66 fanatics going into the year already were energized, and it seems like there's a growing crowd of people taking more of an active interest.
That's really true. I think that's well said, because people that have been more casual Route 66 fans, the excitement has really got them revved up for this year. And, of course, those of us that have sort of lived and breathed Route 66 for a number of years, whether we're gift shop owners or writers or authors or whatever, preservationists, this is the year to let Route 66 shine. And so the timing with this book was really great. Reedy Press, my publisher, many kudos to them, because they saw the promise of it, particularly in this year. So, we all really worked together to get it published this spring for this year. So I'm really excited about that, because that allows a little extra light to be shown on these women's stories.
It seems like your brand, your name has, when we say regional brand, that region has grown. I mean, Washington, Missouri, I see this summer at the Transportation Museum. So it seems like you've not only gained traction after a number of books, but it seems like your map is just a lot bigger these days.
Well, thank you for noticing that. It does seem to be growing a bit. I'm very excited to be speaking at the Missouri History Museum's Route 66 Centennial Festival, and that's just coming up the first weekend of May, April 30th through May 3rd or 4th, something like that. I am speaking on the Friday morning, which I think is May 1st. And then in June, I'll be speaking at the iconic old courthouse in St. Louis, and that's also part of a year-long special. I'm booked in Tulsa in June at the AAA Route 66 Road Fest. Reedy Press and my publicist are getting calls to book me in New Mexico and California, which I think I'm going to get as far as this summer. So it's pretty exciting. I can indulge my love of travel and, kind of spread the news about these women and what they did on Route 66.
And the timing here hits a nerve, as I know today is your mother's birthday, and how does her story, her experience, influence this book?
Well, that's an interesting question, because that's played a part of it. When I had gone back to SIUE to do my master's degree, my degree says history, period, the one word, which is fine. But the things that I concentrated on were public history, Native American history, and definitely women's history. So I've got some background in women's studies. But my mom did really inspire me. My dad and mom were both professional musicians starting out, and then they became music educators, and I came along somewhere in that period of time, and eventually they opened a retail music store, which they operated, or my mom did after my dad passed, but for 30 years in downtown Litchfield, actually. But my mom, really looking back to when I grew up, basically in the 50s, she was everything. She was a wonderful homemaker. She was a fantastic cook. She was a great baker. She was a wonderful seamstress. She made little dresses and Halloween costumes and things for me. She was a very loving and traditional mother, and yet she spent many, many hours a week teaching music and still occasionally performing professionally. And I remember as little girls do, sort of going in and peeking in Mom's closet, and she had glittery high heel shoes, and she had beautiful dresses that she wore when she had music gigs, when she played professionally. And then when she was at home, she had on an apron, and she was cooking and baking.
Yeah, quite an endeavor, and you talk about the aprons, the way era women impacting Route 66 and women's history, and I can imagine it's only harder when you talk about your mother balancing family and career and everything after your dad passed. There weren't the conveniences. There were no grub hubs. There were no slip it in the oven for 5 minutes, and it wasn't, like I know people will complain about the fast food industry not being healthy, but it wasn't designed for you to go 6 days a week. There weren't any shortcuts back then.
There really weren't. I have very few memories of us eating out, except we would take a family vacation every year. And of course, when I think it was a preteen, maybe 13 or 14 tops, we did the traditional trip on Route 66. We drove all the way to California with Dad and Mom in the front seat and me in the back seat following along on a map, which I had fallen in love with maps as a little kid. Imagine that. And and we went, we took the traditional trip, and I have a few memories still of that. But other than that, we didn't go out to eat. Everything was just very, as you say, just very traditional without a lot of extra conveniences. So my mom did all of that, and I appreciated it then, but I never appreciated it fully until I was a young mom, with 2 children to look after, and my late husband had a business that I helped out in. My parents had a business that I helped out in, and you're trying to do all those things. That's when I started to really, really appreciate what my mom did, that she fulfilled both sides of things.
Any thing you think that will surprise people who have read their fair share of 66 books, and maybe women's history books as well?
I think people will be surprised a little bit. The book is a really almost even mix of the women that basically became legends because of their work along Route 66 and in food industry, etc. And approximately the other half are women that were mural artists, journalists, public servants, etc. And a few of those women, if people are sort of into art or architecture, they will recognize some of those names. 2 of our really foremost American female architects, Mary Coulter and Julia Morgan, who mostly practiced in California and the Southwest, so they're not quite as common names back here in the Midwest. But people will know them, but they are just not generally associated with Route 66, just like the artist Georgia O'Keeffe. We don't necessarily think of Georgia O'Keeffe as being associated with Route 66, but there will be some interesting stories that people may read for the first time. The first female mayor in Missouri was in St. James, Missouri, a Route 66 town. There were mural artists that painted in public buildings during the 1930s, like post offices, along Route 66. So I think people will be surprised. I think people will be surprised at some of the stories.
Has this been a cathartic process for you? Is there anything you dealt with as a woman growing up through this age that it was kind of like a therapy series of therapy sessions writing this?
I had not really considered that thought, but I'm glad you brought it up. I think you are somewhat right on that, because when I was a young woman working in a small town, a couple small towns, several small towns in Illinois, smoking in offices was still allowed, which was a problem for me because of almost lifelong allergies and asthma. The attitude of male bosses toward women employees was not, let's just say, always ideal. The idea of women, as you mentioned earlier, not being able to get a credit card on her own signature, that sort of thing. So women of my generation, we experienced all that to one degree or another. And so writing about some of these women that really faced down gender discrimination to become, say, licensed architect or licensed highway engineer, I guess that is cathartic.
Appearances close to home. I mean, it's one thing to be an author, but hey, she's one of us, basically. Just what's it like to do these book signing events in areas that we'd call that final 100 miles of 66 home for you?
Yes, absolutely. I think book signings are always validating. I think this is my 8th book, although 3 were collaborations, so it's my 5th actually solo book. But I think book signings are validating in the sense that you have struck a nerve, struck a chord with something, that your reader is interested in, that you have written about. And that's really a very validating experience, that it was worthwhile to spend all that time and work to produce a book.
All right, and just to close, I know we've talked about the era, we've talked about 66, but any individuals in this book that you just find especially engrossing that you detailed?
Yes, and, including some in basically our area, like you mentioned, the last 100 miles of Illinois Route 66. I write about Joyce Cheryl, who was the operator for about 25 years before she was murdered, operator of the Cheryl's Coliseum Ballroom in Beneld, Illinois. A woman in Springfield, Illinois, on the early route of Route 66 on 2nd Street, that in the early 1900s became the most popular florist in Springfield, and then later invested in a very forward-thinking apartment building, because, of course, in the 1900s, young people, especially young women, it was frowned upon, that they lived by themselves in an apartment. And so this woman, whose name was Belle Miller, built an extraordinarily beautiful upper-class apartment building for young women professionals. And the building still stands, and as of the late 1990s, it became the Inn at 835, a very glamorous bed and breakfast.
Almost like you feel like you're meeting these people. I guess that's part of the joy of being a author of nonfiction.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, because it's just the most interesting experience to go out and talk about some of these women and the reaction, because they either did something rather astounding anyway, but particularly because they did something notable in the 1920s or the 1930s or whatever. It's just pretty fun to share these stories.
Anything else we need to know about the book? And if you don't find it in an indie bookstore, how can you get your hands on this great book, which is getting a lot of traction out there?
Over at my publisher, Reedy Press, they are working hard to get this book stocked. I won't guarantee it's in every, but very many bookstores, both indie and chain bookstores like Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, which are good stores. So in bookstores and Route 66 souvenir shops, gift shops, sometimes you'll have a diner, restaurant stop that's got a little gift shop. So they're working to get the book in the majority of stops along the length of Route 66 from Chicago to California. And I already know of 2 or 3 stops in California. They're already stocking it. So that's a great place to buy the book if that's accessible to you, because you can support a business on Route 66. Of course, there's other options. Online, Powell's Books, Amazon, all the online retailers, and online from my publisher, Reedy Press. So there's a lot of options. Support an indie business if you can, but buy it anyway.
I love it. Anything else we need to know?
I think that that's it. I hope everyone enjoys the book, and people can go to my website if they'd like. It's Cheryl, Eichar, Jett.com. It has one page that's devoted to the upcoming events, and there are quite a few of them. If you're in the Illinois area or any of the states, on Route 66, please go to that webpage and see where I'm going to be when, and if I'm near you, I would love to meet you or see you and sign a book for you.
Well, thanks for joining us for the forum on WSMI. We'll see you again next week right here on 106.1 and WSMIradio.com.